Hello and welcome back to my Python tutorial series. In this video I'll be covering list, which is one of the most common data structures found in Python. Now a list is an ordered container meant to store an item of any type, similar to an array found in Java or C++, but with a few notable differences. The first and most important difference between a list in Python and an array found in other programming languages would be that a list in Python is dynamically sized, meaning that it can grow and shrink in size as the program runs. Where with an array found in a programming language like C, you must first define the size of the array, and then if you need to use more space than that defined size, you would have to first create a whole new array, copy all of the elements from the old array to the new one, and then add the element that you want to add. Where with Python, you don't really need to do this. You can just add and remove items as you please without even really thinking about it. The second difference is that Python lists can store items of different types, meaning that you can store integers, strings, booleans, and doubles all in the same list, where with arrays you normally have to define a single type, and that is the only type of data that you can store in that array. And with those differences out of the way, I can now go over how to create a list. So the first method would be using the list constructor function. So I'll define a variable, I'll call this one list1, set it equal to list with an open and close parentheses. As I mentioned, this is the list constructor function. It's simply a function that will give you an empty list. The second way would be using the list literal. So I'll define another variable, call this list2, and set it equal to an open and closed squared bracket. Now this is the list literal. And these are two different ways of getting the exact same result, which is a variable that holds an empty list. Also, if I wanted to, I could define a list that already holds some values. So let's say I wanted a list that held the integers 1 through 5. I would define another variable, call this list3, set it equal to another open and close squared bracket, so another list literal, except now I will list the values 1 through 5 inside of the squared brackets. Now this is a list that holds the values, or the integers, 1 through 5. If I print this, so print list3, you should see that list, that exact same list printed off, which you do there. As I said before, a list can contain items of any type. So here I have a list of integers, a list of strings, a list of doubles, a list of Boolean values, and finally a list of mixed data types. Now that I understand what a list is and how to create one, what if I wanted to access a specific item within a list? Well, to do this I would use something called list indexing. And to understand what list indexing is, let's first recall the definition of a list, in that it is a ordered container of items. The key word there being ordered. So here I have a list of numbers, 6, 1, 2, 9, and 5. And each one of the items in this list has an index that corresponds directly to its order in this list. So 6 is the first number that occurs in this list, so it would have the index 0, because in computing we often start our count with 0 instead of 1. 1 would have the index of 1, 2 would have the index of 2, 9 would have the index of 3, and 5 would have the index of 4. So let's say I wanted to access the 6 in this numbers list. Well, to do that, let's define a variable, call it first num, set it equal to numbers, because that is the name of the list. See, the name of the list here is numbers. So I write the name of the list, and then put a square bracket, and then inside of this square bracket, you put the index of the number that you want to access. So recall we were wanting to recall the first number, which was 6, that would have an index of 0. So if I print first num, we should see that 6 is the number that is printed, which we do. What if I want to print the last number, which is that number 5 there? Well, to do that, remember we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So 5 is at the index 4. So I would replace this 0 with 4. Also needed to replace that there because I changed the variable name. And we can see here that the number 5 is printed. So that's pretty simple. You can just access a variable name, or sorry, access a item in the list. What if I wanted to change that item? So what if I wanted to change this 5 to the number 7? Well, that's pretty simple as well. So I would say numbers at 4, because remember, 5 is at index 4. So right now I am modifying this value. So let's say numbers at 4 is equal to 7. So now, so actually let me print numbers first. Print the numbers list before this change, and then I will print the numbers list after the change. If I can type it. There. So here we can see we have before the change, so we have 6, 1, 2, 9, and 5, and then I changed the last element from 5 to 7, and then I printed it again, so now I have a list that says 6, 1, 2, 9, and 7. So that is how you change a element in a list. Now I would like to demonstrate a few different operations that can be performed on an existing list. So I'm using this exact same list of numbers from before, and let's say I wanted to add a number to the end of it. Well, in Python, there is a set of functions defined for a list that can be accessed through something called the dot operator. To use the dot operator, you just type the name of the list, and then dot. Now this period is the dot operator, and then you just type the name of the function that you want to use. In this case, I want to add a number to the end of the list, so the function to do that is append. So I just type append, and let's say I want to add the number 7, so I would just type 7, and now this function will place the number 7 after the 5 in this list. So let's print the list before we add the number 7. And let's print the list after we add the number 7. So if I run this, we can see this is before we add the number 7, and then afterwards we can see that the number 7 is placed after the number 5. We can also remove an item from a list, and we can do this with one of two ways. We could either remove an item by its value, or we can remove an item by its index. If I want to remove an item by its value, I would type the name of the list with the dot operator, and I would use the remove function. And let's say I want to remove the item with the value 9, which would be this item here. So I would just type 9 here. And as before, let me print the name of the list before and after. And let me run this. We can see first we have 6, 1, 2, 9, and 5, and then we remove the 9, so now we have 6, 1, 2, and 5. Let's say I wanted to remove that exact same value using the index method. So let me replace this with the function pop. Now this pop function is meant to be used with an index, so this number 9 is at index, what is that, index 3. So I would type 3 here. And we can see we get the exact same result. Well, what if I wanted to remove the 6? So I would just type 0 there, because 6 is at index 0. We can see this removes the number 6 from the list. The last thing that I would like to show in this video would be how to get the length of a list, which is just the number of items that are stored in it. So to do this, you would use the len function, and you would pass the name of the list as an argument to this function, and this will give you the number of items in the list. So Let me set this to a variable length and print that variable. And we should see the value 5 because there are 5 elements in this list. So let me just verify that. And there you have it. We do see the number 5. All right, that pretty much wraps it up for this video. If you found it helpful, please leave a like. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below. And with that, I will see you in the next one. Thanks.